Madhupur is a very small town in modern Jharkhand. Once upon a time, it was part of Bihar. It's located about 300 kilometers by road from Kolkata, and it's a 2-hour train ride from Durgapur. Now, once upon a time, a lot of well-off Bengali gentlemen based in Calcutta had, garden villas, what we call Bagan Badi in Madhupur, and they went for changes as recommended by their doctors when they were feeling a little under the weather, because the scenic surroundings and salubrious climate and excellent water supposedly helped greatly to restore people's health in no time at all. My own mother's grandfather owned one of those houses. Some of them are now being used, in renovated condition as homestays and hotels. Now, I just happened across a new book by a new author, Somarendra Narayan Roy, titled Memories of Madhupur. Now, he is at least 10 years my senior, and he had a very unusual upbringing because his father was a retired district magistrate in the days when ICS officers were regarded as heaven-born, and they enjoyed a very specially high social status in both Indian eyes and British. And his grandfather let him run wild for the first 12 years of his life. So he had a most unusual upbringing, which brings to mind Kimball O'Hara in Rudyard Kipling's classic novel about India. And in this collection, Mr. Rai has painted short vignettes of the wonderful and wayward and extraordinarily educative childhood that he enjoyed in those first 12 years. And I'm going to read out 1 or 2 episodes from this collection. In the first chapter, titled Correspondence, he writes, "There was a smallish banyan tree by our post office, not on the station roadside, no, rather behind the PO. My bicycle used to rest against it while I went busy with my other rare possession, a pilot fountain pen made in Madras. You know Chennai, no? You see, at age 10, I could actually also write Bengali, Devanagari and some Nastalik, the usual scripts for Urdu. Plus, I had hit upon the idea of hoarding some free postcards. And because you do not seem to know about this commodity, I will now digress. PC has started meaning a well-known actress of Bollywood. Till recently, it had stood for a certain central minister, Mr. Chidambaram. Before that, it used to mean a personal computer. But I am referring to days older yet, when it simply meant a postcard. Postcards used to be a piece of stiff paper, blank on one side and a half sides. The remaining half side was pre-printed with a stamp and some ruled lines for an address. If thrust down into a letterbox, the card would get delivered to that address. The ones with a brown stamp were meant for local use, that is within the same metro city. The green ones, on the other hand, could travel all over India. Back in the 60s, some progressive corporate marketers had hit upon the idea of buying postcards in bulk from the post office. Then they would rubber stamp their company advertisements or slogans on the blank half of the address side. Finally, they would hand them out at a market junction, a bioscope tent, or maybe give them to some shop, which would then attract customers with this extra lure. I used to get some from a friendly stationery shop. Literacy was not only largely absent in those days, it was itself unknown. People just did not think that there was something called literacy or illiteracy. Most rural people simply accepted it that some male children were born to the upper castes of various communities, ready with the ability to read and write. It was pointless for others to try and reach those gifted levels. This compelled the national population, well, much of it, to depend on the few thus literate for written communication. For a living, though, people had to travel to the towns and cities, and those sinful places simply held them back there, sort of absorbed them, possibly with the squadrons of funny ladies who invariably lived there. Some letters and maybe a little cash used to trickle back to our villages. Sometimes they would also make it the other way, maybe the sales proceeds of some ancestral silver, or a letter complaining about some long silence or about the perpetually bad rains. These latter activities, written communication to the towns, formed the basis of my quote-unquote profession. I would sit in my place, my pilot pen and a packet of free postcards ready. Along would come a bent old woman with a stick and maybe a cherut or a hookah. She would sit down and ask for a light. Sometimes I obliged. Yes, I know I was only 10, and will you shut up, please? What is the matter again now? Have you not got news of that rascal Wahid from Calcutta? Why, Lachman returned just the other day, didn't he? Quite possibly the old woman had forgotten why, other than the light, she had come to me in the first place. Now my question would remind her of her only grandson, unmarried, dowry unearned, and run away to Calcutta, with promises of employment and cash remitted back home to grandmother. So the first thing that would happen would be that she would pull down a slipping veil and start weeping, then wailing why her Shia Khuda or Sunni Allah had not taken her back. What was he waiting for? Others nearby, and I would try to console her, and she would then start dictating suddenly in what she believed to be Farsi or at least Urdu, but was actually just Dehati. Her today's letter thus: अरे बाबुआ वाहेद तू गया हमरा इंतकाल तक तो लौटेगा नहीं, वो हम जन्नत एक और बकरा बेच दिया, पैसे मिलने से हत्या करेगा, तू रोटी रोज ठीक से खाना, 5 वक्त नमाज तो रोज पढ़त रहा है ना, etc. etc. Which means, darling Wahid, now you have vanished. I know you won't come back to see me even once. I sold a goat to buy provisions. Eat regularly. Are you doing namaz 5 times a day? A rambling missive to her grandson believed to be working in Calcutta. Or it would be 3 giggling young girls, one of them married to the elder brother of the other 2. The smallest would tell me that her bhabhi, that his sister-in-law, wanted to write a letter to her bhabhi's husband, gone away to far-off Patna, but could not dictate it to me because it was a secret between the 2 of them. So could I please write it all by myself? And I quite clearly remember the wealthy sarpanch of a nearby village who wanted to kill his 3 sons, all presumed to be doing some railway work in nearby Asansol. These 3 had married and earned some dowry. After the youngest one's marriage, they had gone away, leaving the wives behind. They had promised that they would be back in 2 months, well in time for seasonal work in the fields, with money as well as markin, that is American maize seeds for sowing. But it had just been reported by a relative from Asansol that the 3 were living in great comfort with 2 Asansol bicycles and 1 Muslim woman, all 3 of them. In this, the old Brahmin identified innumerable sins, not least of which was not writing to him. So the old man wanted me to write to his same reporting relative in Asansol, requesting him to pack the 3 illegitimate boys back home. I remember asking him, eyes twinkling, whether the 3 fellows, all of whom I knew well, were really his own sons, and he just smiled ruefully. One other side of my profession was the reading of received missives. The same general Indian population could hardly read. People would often bring their letters to me for reading. Usually it will be all right if the writings were legible. But if the writer had been well versed in Urdu, it would be quite difficult, because those writers tended to mix their alphabets together in the upper class, refined, cursive way. Another line of business was the writing of money order forms. A tiny strip used to be provided for the purpose of pouring out all local woes, calling for considerable skill in precise writing. I was far better at that than anybody else in that geography, mainly because I skipped a lot of soppy rubbish and stuck to the points after listening to the entire dictation. There, of course, was the question of gratitude. Blessings dominated. Other gifts ranged from a brinjal or 2 to 1 live black goat. This latter animal was stoutly refused entry at my home by my grandfather, even after the owner came and credited my letter writing for the fact that his son-in-law had passed some stupid examination or other. Back went the bleating goat. There was also the rather touching custom of somebody showing me a silver rupee in her palm, which I would have to touch once. The idea was that I had accepted the rupee and then gifted it right back to the poor woman. I also remember once receiving 2 used and dead torch cells. Old Ramdhania had thought they were important to padhi-likhi gentlemen like myself. Yet another service I often rendered under the old banyan was helping the barely literate delivery peons of the post office. Often these Sarkari stalwarts would not be able to quite make out the address on a letter and would seek my help. In this, my knowledge of local geography, strangely inadequate in the peons, was of greater help than my expertise with the various alphabets. In December 1964, I had to leave these people and migrate to Calcutta. One regular client requested me to leave enough written letters with her to last till I returned. The next in this series of stories is titled Abdul Narad. Now ponder upon that name for a while. Most of the town subscribed. The blind old platform 2 beggar gave a 5 rupee note wherever he might have got it. School students came up with 5 naya paisa coins, at that time a treasure. I remember the King George quarter rupee I put in. The railway people arranged free transport all the way to the railway factory hospital, some 35 miles away at Chittaranjan. Abdul Wahid was a retired railway labourer. He was also a Muslim mendicant, actually a sort of mushkilasan, chaps who, for a pittance, prayed for resolution of others' problems. A hugely popular man, he supplemented his pension with his kajkol, that is begging bowl, usually a dried half-gourd, and shared the proceeds with poorer others from all creeds. He had never had a family. He used to say that he had lost his Hindu parents when a boat had capsized near Patna when he was just 4 or 5, had himself been washed ashore and been brought up by his Muslim foster parents as a devout Panchvakti, one who prays 5 times a day. Muslim, illiterate, He had ended up as a railway contractor's labourer and had been later absorbed by the then East Indian Railways. He had even part-timed as a steam fireman on the Asansol-Jharkhand stretch but had fallen out with some of the whitish steam drivers over his fierce patriotism. He was demoted back to labourer. While he was growing up, people found out that he had a memory which never forgot anything once heard. The president of our town's amateur railway theatre group said that in his home country, now East Pakistan, acting parts like Brahma, Narad, Durvasa, Dronacharya were often performed by elderly bearded Muslims who in any case were perfectly familiar with Hindu mythology. So he started using Abdul as a prompter, without the pamphlet, till other elders also decided that he would probably prove to be a better actor than even the specialists. So he was given the role of Narad, I forget in which play, for which he did not even need a makeup. He looked the part, what with his flowing beard and somewhat unkempt hair. Let us recall what Narad really was. He was a mythical Hindu sage, a favorite of Lord Narayan, who went around playing a veena and flying on a paddy horse. You know, what we call dheki in Bengali. That venerable guy specialized in cutting chukli, which is the traditional Indian art of telling chap A that he knew someone who had overheard chap B telling chap C what a cad chap A was, and so on. This invariably led to tsunamis in the huge ocean of peace that India otherwise seemed to have been, a mild Kurukshetra or a Lanka aside. Anyway, the character physically suited Abdul, spiritually it did not. And Abdul could often be seen forlornly praying, seeking forgiveness for any upset he might have caused by his doing Narad. Where were we? Oh, the subscriptions. What had happened was that Abdul Narad, as he was then known to some, all others calling him Narad Abdul, was down with a bad case of something, possibly typhoid. He being the best and only Narad around, I think he also did Dronacharya, a revered guru in Mahabharata. Our community could not afford to lose him. The hospital at the railway locomotive factory at Chittaranjan, some 35 miles away, had good doctors and treatment was arranged instantly. Some money was also needed, hence the contributions. But he died at the hospital and Abdul Narad lies buried at the Mihijam Railway Muslim Cemetery. Now, I think I will read just one more before I stop this particular series. There's a story about A.H. Wheeler's, and which I particularly like, and some of you may still have noticed the A.H. Wheeler bookstores on many railway stations. So Mr. Rai writes, Southern Railways and most of South Central Railways have Higginbotham's bookstalls at their stations. Elsewhere in India, we have A.H. Wheeler and Company, specialists in books who operate only at the rail stations. They were started and have been continuously owned by a Bengali family of Allahabad. Inadequately updated political leaders have been trying to throw them out as an Angrez company. Such leaders might eventually succeed in their effort, although Wheeler has always been a purely Allahabad-based Bengali company. But all that is neither here nor there. Just as Kellner used to have a restaurant at important stations and also a bar at every junction, A.H. Wheeler used to sell books and periodicals at important stations and also the latest newspapers at every junction. Madhupur was the junction for Hazaribag's district Giridih town, handling most of the world's mica. All that is well known, documented extensively too, as you will find out by googling A.H. Wheeler. But here is some additional interesting stuff. The Wheeler agents, as franchises used to be known in those days, had many unofficial activities, helping nearly everybody and thus never attracting authorities' ire. We turn to some of these. On its way to the Taj Mahal and the Red Fort, the Tufan Express from Howrah used to pull into Madhupur around 15-40 hours every day. Between engine changes in Asansol and Jharkhand, it used to quench its thirst for water for 8 minutes. Its tractor was a 462 bullet-nosed WP with a center headlight and a horn, which was designed by Baldwin of Philadelphia. But these locomotives were wrongly called Canadians because they had been imported via a Canadian company by just about everybody. They used to pull all express and mail trains. Other trains had their flat-nosed WG types with their top headlights and whistles. The recently famous Shahen Shah, a luxury dollar tourist train going around India, is pulled by a WP. At Madhupur for some time, a small wooden desk near HW was the town's sole source of bakery bread. From Calcutta, the Tufan used to bring about 10 loaves either from Seth's Bakery of Lily Biscuit fame or from Great Eastern Hotel. The paltry number of loaves was explained by most rural Hindus not eating mleccha food and rural Muslims not even knowing about bakery bread. So it was left to a few Indian Christians and Anglo-Indian families and some others like us to patronize HW as the appointed purveyors of fine baking from Calcutta. Retired railway guard Mr. Stephenson, or was it Robinson, once even got a Great Eastern birthday cake for his granddaughter through HW. We live right by the up-incoming outer semaphore signal on the Howrah-Delhi main line at Madhupur. So the moment the semaphore arm changed down for Tufan, I used to race off on my trusty old Norton bicycle to the station, a mile away. Normally I beat the 7-up Tufan to platform 2. Panting, I used to collect the loaf, and then, while the train was still there, guzzling gallons from our Pampu Talao, that is pump pond, I used to select my copy of the Amrita Bazar Patrika right from the AHW peon at the brake van and scoot back. Soon there came a stop to both these businesses, at least at Madhupur, as Bardhaman Mishtanno Bhandar, branch Giridi of Madhupur, collared the newspaper business, and the Ahujas became agents for Seth's bread and Lily biscuit. All that was regular and simple, but other things happened too. One was the unofficial rental of reading matter. Many AHW shops, including ours, used to make a small code mark on a book if you so wanted. This enabled participating AHW outlets elsewhere to accept the book back if in new condition. They would then refund 80 or 90% of the price. So travelers who read fast had a great time. Another activity was getting books on order. My grandfather would often send me with a slip and the extra rupee or two when I went on my daily station trip. The book thus ordered would come in one working day, foreshadowing today's Flipkart. Much of our Penguin for entertainment, Pelican for education, and Puffin for children library came up that way. I am not sure whether this business was quite official. The service was never advertised. But the really interesting things were their courier and money transfer systems, though not quite desk to desk. The first went this way. Suppose chap A at station X wanted to send a moderately sized packet to chap B at station Y, both places being on the AHW map. He, chap A, would go to AHW at station X and hand the packet in with a small fee. It would be the responsibility of chap B to collect the packet from AHW at station Y, but the packet would be there much faster than regular post. I once saw the AHW man request a known regular passenger, the usual courier, the train guard was busy, to take along such a packet, saying that his AHW counterpart, duly telegraphed, would come and collect it. Just imagine such a thing amidst today's scare of terrorist bombs. I do not recall much about the money transfer process except that the sealed cash packet, at a charge much higher than for ordinary parcels, would be claimed by the recipient after some kind of identification job. But I remember that it worked fine. Some system. What? Now, I would like today's children and even their mothers to wonder that these children not only survived, but flourished and prospered in every sense, even in the sense that they got very well educated and made good careers and brought up children who are now settled abroad, and they are now enjoying telling tales in the dusk of their lives. Are today's mothers really raising their children much better? Honestly. One correction before I finish off. I said father in the beginning. The father was a district magistrate, but actually it would be grandfather. Enjoy.